When I joined the ePortfolio assessment team, I didn't know a lot about ePortfolios. I knew a lot about portfolios, hard copy portfolios. So what I really came to understand is that there are two levels of new ways of working with students because of the electronic capacity of the portfolio. So for students in my courses, I can have them include an array of projects and visuals in a way that I never could before. But what excites me even more is the capacity of ePortfolios to tie courses together. So it offers new possibilities for collaborating with colleagues, and it offers students opportunities for making connections among courses that I don't think they've ever had before.
I think that one of the advantages of being on the ePortfolio committee has been a clear conceptual framework of the advantages of ePortfolios, what we called the three-legged stool approach of using ePortfolios in assessment, in integrative learning, and for a showcase for student work. I think that that's something that helps clarify the message that we need to get out to both faculty and students.
And then as the committee sort of started talking more and more about them, I saw them more as sort of an integrative tool to use throughout their entire college experience, and sort of building that portfolio and using it within the courses as they move along, and connecting, seeing how they can connect first year to second year to third year to fourth year using the portfolio was really interesting and something I really hadn't thought about.
And I've become much more convinced that ePortfolios, or a portfolio-like approach to organizing student learning, can do things that otherwise can't be done with our standard ways of approaching teaching and learning.
In different kinds of ways, the ePortfolio experience over the past year has been very instructive in terms of different kinds of ways we can use it to encourage students to adopt a digital identity, and to encourage them to reflect on their work in deep and meaningful ways, and to assess really the kinds of ways in which students are learning across their 4 or 5 years.
So for me, for me personally, as the director of the School of Education, overseeing multiple different programs and pathways, this is an exciting development because it allows for us to bring in tools to really enhance the work that is already demanded of us. So I would give an example would be, so our teachers, our future teachers, need to think deeply about their philosophy of education. And they begin in foundational level courses where they write philosophies and reflect on their own experiences. And as they develop through each course in methodology, in practice, in curriculum, in historical, socio-cultural foundations, they add to and revise and rethink their purposes and their beliefs. So, and in administration and leadership, the same is also true. So we already have huge opportunities for integrated learning.
I remain very convinced of their transformative potential in terms of student learning, their transformative potential in terms of how faculty relate to students and to one another especially, and sort of breaking down the walls of the classroom.
Faculty on this campus are really sensitive to student learning, and they're focused on students. I think that's part of the Chico State experience, is the faculty's widespread commitment to students and keeping students in mind. I think what's going to be critical is faculty understanding, or coming to understand, how in fact their values are promoted, instantiated, enhanced by the use of the ePortfolio tool.
As University Registrar and kind of the data custodian for all student information, I certainly see this as, something that I need to have my eye on. There's the integration that would need to happen between our student information system and our e-portfolio solution. There's that piece of it, but it's also on the back end. It's, you know, it's a protection of student data. It's the access to student information that students need to, you know, be able to keep access to their information. Those kinds of things, you know, are where I think that my role would fit in with all of this. You know, we can throw technology at a lot of things, and if it's not widely accepted, and I think that that's where it would be most impactful for campus, is if it is widely adopted. So to be able to do that means that we have to provide, I believe, support systems for faculty.
As a manager of the Technology and Learning Program, one of the things that we strive to do on campus is make the work of the faculty member as easy and pleasant as possible. What I'm concerned about with e-portfolios and rolling them out, which is a fairly new thing for us, is that the faculty feel comfortable using them, and so I would want us to be able to support them in every which way we could.
I think it needs to be easy. I think it needs to be really easy. I think it should be drag and drop, really easy, seamless integration into some other technologies we're using. If it's easy to use and pretty to look at, I think that'll make adoption stronger.
We really need to be clear with faculty how using e-portfolios is, it's going to be most successful if it's embedded in their teaching. I guess the big concern is that faculty could see it as something more, something extra. In fact, it invites teaching a little differently, but if you teach a little differently, then using the e-portfolio, I think, is very natural. So it's helping people to make that shift where it becomes kind of second nature to them to think about how the e-portfolio could promote student learning and give faculty a window on student learning.
I'd like to imagine that what we're doing is developing a media ecology, and that is that we might very well push out two different options to the campus, depending on the kinds of purposes that they have, whether it's a purpose for the major, like 5-year accreditation, or other kinds of things, so that people could select the kinds of processes and platforms that might work best for them and thus might work best for the students as well.
I think faculty buy-in is really, really crucial. I think we probably need to do some sort of a pilot project or something and introduce it slowly and see how it works. I think somehow we have to develop trust with the faculty so that they know that it's not being used in ways that we're not intending it to be used.
I think a lot about technology, and I've always been, kind of gravitated toward it and been an early adopter of things, first iPhone, stuff like that. But so I really think about technology and the user and how that works for them. So it really doesn't matter how great the product is if the first and primary issue isn't how will the user access it, how will the user be trained in it, and what kind of support the user will have.
So I think critical to the success is the large campus conversation, followed by a ton of faculty development and support. Because, and I mean it on two levels, actually. So there's support for whatever the tool might be that's adopted, but there's also the professional development for faculty who may be hesitant to think beyond the scope of their excellent teaching and learning and students' needs to deepen students' understandings across courses and throughout their development as undergraduates. And that's not a criticism of faculty, please don't get me wrong at all. I think our faculty are the most committed teachers of students and champions of student learning. But because of that very factor, I believe that they focus deeply on their own teaching. So I think there's professional development at that level to broaden faculty valuing of interdisciplinary, integrated connections across programs for students.
I'm also thinking about it as the option head for media arts, thinking about beginning e-portfolios in sort of their first hands-on digital classes, so media aesthetics, intro to digital audio and photography, and get them sort of starting to build that so that by the time they're a senior and they're working on that capstone presentation piece, they have everything there. Because the biggest problem our seniors have is they don't keep track of their stuff that they made. And so having an e-portfolio available to them to say, there's all my content that I created, and here are descriptions of the assignments and my learning objectives that I can really show employers is really useful.
I think when students come in, they don't really, sometimes they're not able to articulate all that they've learned in their classes, and I think this is just such a great tool for them, you know, and as they prepare for an interview or they prepare for grad school, they can go back and they'd have all these resources in one place. I can see that just being beneficial across, like, you know, all years when they're in school, you know, and after they graduate.
And being over on the co-curricular side, you know, naturally I gravitated toward thinking of e-portfolios related to professional development and job search, you know, and inclusion of, you know, co-curricular experiences. That's, you know, typically not always as easy to reflect on a resume, and so an e-portfolio really gives you a chance to connect those things.
And then I see kind of the second tier of, you know, once the students are really hopefully developing meaningful portfolios, then hopefully, you know, my team and others can really just help demonstrate the importance of how that's going to be critical in their career plan and how they're looking about, you know, assessing, gosh, this is all that I've done and how can I take this information and move it into, you know, my career path and, you know, how am I qualified for an XYZ job? Let me go back to my portfolio and see all that I've done, or I have an upcoming interview. I want to talk about this and this, and I can really see ways that it can be tied together.
I think a lot of educational experiences for students are punctuated experiences. They're separate classes that are associated with their major or with general education or other kinds of things. And what ePortfolio's a thoughtful, reflective, proactive approach to the use of ePortfolios can do is help students think more globally about their learning and longitudinal about their learning, about how we'll progress over time. I think of ePortfolios as sort of the potential string to a series of pearls that are otherwise collected in a box, but not connected together as a coherent whole. And so ePortfolios as a tool holds the promise, I think, of being able to help forge those connections, to make connections across the students' educational experiences in the major, general education, and over time. I think the other thing that it does, it has a potential to have a huge impact on how the faculty themselves see their own curriculum, see their role in the curriculum, and how that they can work together and think about the curriculum as a unified whole in a way that perhaps has not yet been realized. And so if faculty in a department agree that ePortfolios are something that would be useful to a particular student's experience in their major, then it fosters a communication about what the individual role of the faculty in their courses are to this larger outcome.
I think I'm also excited about the possibilities for assessment, not just for my own department, not just for my own college, but for campus use. Because when we move beyond the student learning level to think about how assessment data helps us to inform programs and continuously improve those programs, that's an additional component for me that ePortfolios allows for us that I'm not sure the entire campus values at this point, but for me personally, I see assessment intimately linked to instruction and learning, and therefore ePortfolios would play a critical role.
So let's make sure, I don't care why people use them, because the outcomes potential outcomes are so fantastic. So if we need to incentivize the use, if we make it easy to use, if we remove all possible roadblocks, then in the end we get what we want, which is this fantastic learning experience.
So I think the possibilities are really boundless, and the payoffs are potentially very high for students and faculty in the university.